All right, so good afternoon or good evening if you're in the USA, and it is wonderful Wednesday morning if you are overseas, or if you're in Europe, you're probably in bed. But thanks for watching live with us. I am Bruce, Mr. Simpler, Faster, Better, or AKA the guy in the blue shirt, as a lot of people know me by. And I am so thrilled I got introduced to Michael, who is in the beautiful city of Dallas. So Michael, why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit and say a couple of words about where you're at, and then we'll get into our conversation about processes and the insanity around processes, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks for having me, first of all. So Michael Wilson, I am the founder and CEO at 𝒀𝒐𝒖𝒓. We do process improvement and documentation. And like I said, I'm based out of the Dallas area, uptown area. Actually just moved here late last year. So still kind of haven't really got the chance to really get to know the area too much, but super excited to get to explore now that things are opening up a little bit.
Well, awesome. Hi, Gracie Ruth. She's saying hi to you. So
Oh,
I
hello.
can see the comment. So if you have the comment button on, you might be able to see as well. I should have pointed that out to you, Michael. But yeah, that's interesting. So common ground is always something I find amazing. And I used to live in the uptown area, and I believe that might be the locale you moved to, right?
Yes, up in uptown. It's great over here. So super excited about it.
Sure. Which streets? I used to be off of Oaklawn Avenue. So
yeah, I'm like right off of like the 75 area.
okay.
I'm trying to think of a main street over here. Like I said, I haven't really learned all the streets just yet, but I've been kind of working indoors. So
Yeah.
over off of like 75 and kind of between, I believe it's 30 and I believe it's 635 is a little somewhere in between.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly where you are. I used to venture over there a lot. I have a lot of still meaningful connections in that area. And then when we were doing the process of meeting in person, there were some networking groups that I used to go to over there. So I used to, some of my processes in Dallas, I used to network morning, lunch, and night times, depending on what day of the week it was. So
Nice.
yeah,
it's definitely transformed a little bit in the last 12 months, right?
I know. I cannot wait to get back to in-person networking. And talking of which, I want to give a shout out to Jake Jordan, because it was through a LinkedIn local that I recently hosted a small meeting there, and I met Jake. And you and Jake go some way back in your connection. So I was fortunate through Jake to meet you, and we had some fantastic Zoom time before we agreed that maybe we should challenge the status quo around processes and the insanity around processes, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So why don't you kind of kick it off? Because I know you and I have the same passion for process improvement, but we also have the same passion for why people don't seem to get why working on their processes is so important, right?
Yeah, you know what I'll say. I feel like I always kind of contributed to like working out, right? It's like one of those things like, if you get up every morning and work out every morning, then you'll have the body that you want. Yeah, we don't do it, right? That voice gets in your head and it tells you, not today, maybe tomorrow. So I think processes kind of become the same way. Like you could have a process down, it can be optimized, and then you still don't follow it, even though that is the exact thing you need to do to get to where you want to go, right? So.
Right.
So I definitely think that it's a mindset thing, I think. And one of those things of just getting too comfortable. Like, I got this. I know how to do it. I don't need to refer to the process anymore, right? I'm smarter than the process.
Right.
I'm not going to do it. So I think that's kind of where the insanity comes, is because we know what it is that we need to do in a lot of cases. We just won't do them, right? So that's when that process enablement comes in.
Right.
Or we're doing something that we know doesn't work. We know the process is broken, yet we keep doing it instead of fixing it, right? So it can be one of those two things, I feel like.
Yeah, so I'll try and make it kind of a little Texan. So when I was in Dallas, so I said to you we were going to talk about some fast tips. So my fast tip here is that in Texan, same old equals same old. In other words, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is the first law of insanity, right? And that's where you and I have a lot of common ground, because we said, scratch our head, we don't get it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you're sitting still and you're not moving forward, and yet you're kind of not changing. And I think in a lot of cases, people know that they need to make a change, they need to do something,
right.
But it's hard, right? It's hard work, it's uncomfortable. It's it takes you to, if you already have a busy schedule, it takes you to make room for improvement, and that's not always an easy thing to do. So I think sometimes it's just kind of easy to stay in that comfort zone, and unfortunately that could mean continually failing or continually not doing what it is that whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So
right, yeah. Well, it's funny because people don't always understand the incremental waste that's happening. And interesting enough, I had Gracie help me with a post today, because Gracie is all about simpler, faster, better herself since we've worked together, and she understands what doing a process cleanup means. And so my other little fast tip is that, if you have one person can save a minute, every day, depending on how many days a month, that might be 20 to 30 minutes per person per month. And and that may not seem a lot for us individual person, but by the time you do the math, right? So by the time you do that 10 times over, or maybe companies 100-fold, or for bigger corporations, it can get into thousands of man hours over the year, right? So
yeah, it's like going to Starbucks and spending $5 a day. It doesn't feel like much. When you do that, for 20 days out of the month, it adds up to some big money, right?
Right.
So I think it's the same thing. Those little things don't seem like a lot, but they actually can have a big impact if you add all that up.
Right.
So those 10 minutes, those 20 minutes, especially for a business. I mean, if you think about, if you operate a business and you get down to what your operational cost is per hour, that really starts to make sense. Like, okay, 30 minutes is actually quite a bit of money for me when I count, how much it actually costs me to operate.
Right.
But I don't think a lot of people really think about it in that detail. But in reality, it does get down. When you talk about process, it does get down to that detail. So
yeah. Well, interesting enough, I always try and get people's imagination that are a little reluctant to looking at processes. So I always challenge them. So another little fast tip for me is, hey, think about how you could save $1 a day, right? And it's back to your Starbucks situation. If every person could save $1 a day, that's $5 a week, or $6, depending on how many days you work. And then again, by the time you do the multiple, depending on the number of people, and and most people can figure out how to save more than $1 a day. And so I find it absolutely fascinating that people don't even want to do the basic math to figure out where they're losing a lot of opportunity. So
yeah, and I think it's, people don't really know, right? There's so many, like, especially in today, there's so many distractions going on that, and I think that's why working with process professionals that do think in that way is so important, because they are going to do that type of thinking, that granular looking into your process and figuring out, okay, what is it really costing you to do it the way you're doing it? Right. I remember when I started my first business, it was a tax business, and I had like 20 employees at the time, and I was going crazy because they were asking me the same stuff every single day, right? So this is kind of my quick tip as far as communication. They were asking me the same stuff every day, and I'm like, there has to be a better way, because I just answered this question yesterday or the day before. And that's really when I started getting to learn about documentation, is documenting a process so that your employees or your team, they don't have to keep coming to you for it, and they have somewhere to go reference a process in order to execute it. So I think that just that communication and giving your team something to really to reference in order to understand how you want to operate and the best way to operate has huge amounts of benefits, including your minds. You've been going crazy trying to answer all these questions. So.
Well, it's funny, when I was a process auditor, one of our rules was if it ain't documented, it didn't happen, right? So that's the other. And people don't always understand exactly what that means. They think you're checking up on them, but actually what it is it's about the the mindset around is, you know, if the person like yourself or a key subject matter expert is not available in the business, you know, where can they go to get the same help and support, and the right level of documentation in the right format can really help get it done, or get her done, as they would say in Texas.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I definitely agree to that. I agree with that. And I would say it's really about removing variation too, right? Because if everyone's doing it differently, you can't really figure out why it's going wrong or what's happening. So
Right.
Remove as much variation as possible. And so that you can really start to analyze the process and say, okay, well, this is why we're getting this result. Now, how do we change that, or how do we improve that? I think is so there's a lot of benefits that come from documenting a process, I believe.
Yeah, I always used to play with a word called standardization, and people used to get confused with standardization. But my definition always used to be, hey, it's the same people doing the same work the same way, getting the same result, right? And then the real key to standardization is it's different people doing the same work the same way or similar way, and you still get the same result. And that's how I used to help people understand what the importance of variation was all about, particularly people variation. You know, we're all uniquely wired, and we're all uniquely driven. And so, yeah, standardization can be a challenge for people without appropriate documentation. So,
yeah, I agree. And speaking on the insanity side, right, or how insane is it really to expect someone to read your mind and know how to do your process the way you want them to do it, right? So, we're not mind readers. So it's like if you don't give them some type of instruction or something that they can reference, it's probably not going to turn out the way you want. And I think the other really powerful thing behind that, if that employee leaves, then now the whole process has to start over and have to figure it out with a new person. Whereas if it's documented, the new person can come in, get trained, and pick up right where the other one left off. So I definitely think documentation is extremely powerful for really any business. But and I think you can have fun with it. Like now we live in a world where it can be video, it can be like all these different ways to document your processes nowadays is pretty awesome, the ways that you can do it if you get creative.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of creativity. In fact, I love, like many adults, I'm a visual learner, and I'm a kinesthetic learner. So the more visual and more hands-on you can make the learning for me. Yeah. And it's funny because you say about the the subject matter experts that have all this knowledge in their head, or what other people might call tribal knowledge or just know-how. It's funny. I've never forgotten I was 15 years old when I started my apprenticeship, and I was always told, go find the guys and the gals with the black books with all their information. And we literally used to have a tiny little notebook, it was called, and that's how people used to document things back then, because we didn't have the digitization, we didn't have smartphones and smart cameras. And I mean, look at us. I mean, we're talking 3,000 miles away, and it's like next door, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's the funny thing is about processes, I tell people, one of the things I love about them is like once you start to understand and you start to realize that they're everywhere. Like how you make your coffee in the morning and how you get up, right? How we got on this whole chat today, and like all of it has a process. The real question is it efficient? Is it effective process, right? So, everything has some type of process, whether it's intentionally designed or not. You're doing something to do the things that you're doing. So I think the beautiful thing about processes is that they can be managed and improved. And I think that to me, at least as someone that is either working in a business or running a business, means that there's some hope.
Well, I liken it to, processes to me are both science and art. And so on the artistic side, I liken it to the fact that, you can always paint a better painting, or you can always make a better pot, right? And a lot of people don't always realize that there's always room for improvement, even if they think they're looking at, in their eyes, what perfectly is artistically pleasing for them. Well, for other people, it may not be that way. Or if you're on the receiving end of the person getting all the variation or all the junk out of the process. You don't see the process that way, right? You see it as ugly and all hunked up and discombobulated, right?
Absolutely. And I think, to that point, like, because you can't really see it, I think there's not really a way to know what's wrong with it. And I think a lot of times people go to their team, or like, for example, if you take marketing, it's the messaging or it's the ad was wrong, when sometimes it's simply just the process, right? Like, it's not people, it's not, it's just the process needs to be improved. And that's like at processology, we teach about intentional process, meaning that an intentional goal with a process intentionally designed for that outcome. Whereas most people are operating with these haphazardous type processes that are just kind of put in place as they're needed, but not ever really strategically thought out and planned, right? So,
right. Go ahead.
No. That was it. I just, that's kind of my point of just intentionally designing to get what you want to get. So.
Well, actually, you touched upon it through, I intentionally, so how we met was through the networking process, right? So I intentionally set up to have a LinkedIn local in person when I was coming to Dallas, Fort Worth. I intentionally did that at the hotel I was staying at because the hotel gifted me the meeting room, which was really nice of them. Very unusual, but very nice. So, and then I intentionally invited a couple of key connections that I knew my process for networking. So it was like, I didn't have to teach them anything. So they came to help me out. And through that, I met Jake Jordan, who's a really good, strong connection of yours. And through Jake understanding the follow-up process, because we did the follow-up. So we showed up at the meeting, we engaged with people, we did the follow-up, and then the follow-up led Jake to saying, oh, you should meet Michael. And then so then we started that process all over again. I showed up to LinkedIn to network with you, and then we engaged with each other on LinkedIn through a Zoom call. And then here we are, following up again with, we thought it'd be great to talk about processes and insanity, right? Because we both. So yeah, it's a great example of if you really do want to intentionally do something in the process, you can do it really, really well. And I mean, I don't know how many steps it took, but it didn't take that many steps to get to you. And right, if you add up all the steps and time we took, it was pretty quick.
Yeah, and I mean, you can imagine if you're doing that constantly, how many new people you can meet, right? So. Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, and I think that's, the key is if your goal is to network and your goal is to meet people, you have a process to do that. And that's exactly what led us here. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And people don't realize they overcomplicate it. And I know Gracie's on. Gracie and I lament about this always. I mean, it's 3 steps. It's just show up, engage, and follow up. And if you keep doing that, show up, engage, and follow up, it will happen. And people, they just overcomplicate it. So
yeah, I mean, definitely it's I think consistency is a big part of it, right? Is
right.
Something consistent enough to see if it's actually working or not working. A lot of times people throw in the towel after 1 or 2 times and like, oh, it didn't work. And
yeah, that didn't work. So we'll go back to the old way. It doesn't work either, right?
Exactly. So
but it feels good because I know it so well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's funny because I talk to a lot of clients and potential clients, and I bring up strategy. And the first thing I get from people is, I have strategy. I don't need any more strategy, right? And it's like, yeah, you probably have a marketing strategy or a business strategy, but do you have an operation strategy or process strategy for the way that you're going to get those things to play out? Right. And so I think that that's a really important thing too, is, it's a different type of strategy, right? So I'm figuring out what is it that you're trying to accomplish, and what strategies can you get in place to do so from a step-by-step basis, and your procedures. So
yeah, I agree with you. And you and I are both core in strategy. We both have that skill, and I just learned that in our warm-up, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, I find a lot of people, they don't understand the process strategy is about the ability to join all the dots together that are not nicely in a line, you know. So some of the dots might be, you know, over on the wall. Some of the dots might be in the other room, you know. Some of the dots might be in a different city, you know. And so process strategy is that ability through familiarization with doing a lot of mapping very often that you get to learn that. And back to your point earlier, that's why people, they need a process strategist. If they're not using process strategy, they're leaving either a lot of opportunity on the table, they're wasting a lot of time, or taking excessive steps, or they're wasting a lot of money, right?
Yeah, you know, I think it's one of those things. It's everyone has processes. We've already determined that, but it's.
Right.
I'm curious. I guess I'll bring this up. Is when is it important to really start taking your processes seriously, right? Because you deal with a lot. Like if you're talking like with startups or solo entrepreneurs, like for them that might not be a big deal today, and even the investment of it may be too time consuming. The financial side of the investing into that and things like that. But there becomes a point where it's a have to have, right? It's a you have to do it. It's not really an option, right? I mean, you can not do it, but chances are things are going to be driving you crazy for sure.
Yeah. Oh, it does. It drives me crazy. So another little fast tip for me, and I'm sure you're going to share this one, is we always find time to do it over, but we don't always find time to do it right.
That is a great one.
Right.
Yeah. That is a great one. Yes.
Yeah. So that whole rework mentality, and I say to people, and I listen for when I talk to people when I'm trying to find out, well, what's their problem in their process. Yeah. Every reword, rework, redoing, reassigning, most rewords are all waste, and people don't necessarily understand that. So the more rewords that somebody says, the more waste or the more opportunity for improvement there actually is around the whole subject. And it doesn't matter what the subject is. So
no, yeah, I do agree with that. I mean, yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And that's a good way to say, especially with the, you're pretty much spending the same amount of time to redo it. Why not, why not go through and fix it so you can stop redoing it, right? Yeah. But I do think that a lot of times we just don't know where to start. And I think that's where your process strategist really comes in to help you figure out where to start. And that's a big one, or how to analyze it in the first place to figure out what the issue is. And I think that will lead me to another point is just making sure that you are going through some type of process discovery phase, knowing what it is that you're actually doing, because that's really the first step of improving anything, right? If you don't know what the process is in the first place, and most people probably hear that and say, I know what my process is, but once you start documenting that process down into a process map or something of that sort, you really start to see, wow, I did not realize like this is what was going on in the process. So it's really, really important to do that process discovery phase and start to actually visually look at it so that you can visually assess where those issues will be.
Yeah, I always tell people it's like planning a vacation. If you don't know that I'm in Santa Clarita, California, and I want to get to, Orlando, Florida, and you're in Dallas, Texas, and you want to get to Orlando, Florida, then the route map or the journey is somewhat different, right? If you don't know where you're starting from. So I always do the whole vacation exercise to get people to realize, oh, so you have to know where you're at before you know where you're going.
Yeah, it's funny. I use a similar analogy. I use more so like the GPS on your phone. Like when even like me today, I can, even if I'm going somewhere that I know how to get there, I'll still put the address into the GPS. Why? Because like, for example, Google, they account for traffic, they account for accidents. So they're going to tell me the fastest, most efficient way to get to where I want to go. Right. But all of that starts with saying, this is where I am today, and this is where I want to go. And then it's able to map out that process to get me where I want to be. So I think that's a really good way to look at process. If you're trying to get more sales or trying to hire better talent or whatever it is that you're trying to do in your business, is really understanding where you are today and why aren't you doing whatever it is that you're trying to do. And now that you can see that, okay, what changes can we make? And sometimes it's very small changes that you can make. and sometimes they're bigger, right? So,
right. Well, it's funny you should say that, because my most watched video on my fast tips on TikTok so far is actually Scott Dixon in the car. He's doing 230 miles an hour, and he's making little adjustments that lead to unbelievable results, because he came from not winning the race to winning the race, and he was just doing tiny incremental adjustments all the way through the race at 230 miles an hour. Imagine that.
A constant, what is it, continuous improvement, right? Is how you get to where you want to go. Yeah.
It's a wonderful example of continuous improvement. So anyway, a little bit about, where should people start? I know you have a wonderful website where people can jump on there to do a quick assessment for themselves. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, and then we'll close out with a couple of new things that you have going on for yourself there, Michael.
Awesome. Yeah. So you can find us at processology.net. On there, you can do a free process assessment. That's going to help you find out if this is even worth you looking into or not. Chances are, if you haven't, it is. There's also tons of resources on our resource library on there to help you with your process improvement initiatives. And yeah, and then obviously you can find me on LinkedIn or any other social media under Mike Danny Wilson.
Right. So it was processology.net, all one word?
Processology sounds like it's spelled exactly like it sounds. processology.net.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. And it's a wonderful website. It's a mature website, because Michael's been in the business for a long time, like I have, but he's got a lot more documented than I have, at least on my website. So I was impressed with the resource you have there, Michael. It's awesome.
Yeah, I always tell people processes are not really a sexy topic, so we're trying our best to make it somewhat fun to go through the process of improving, right? So, so it's really about trying to create nice modern content that you will actually enjoy consuming.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does the rest of the year look like for you? I know you're working on some new stuff, so perhaps just talk about that a little bit, and we'll finish up.
Yeah, so we work with most of our clients remotely, so it's been pretty exciting. We've worked with clients in probably about 11 countries now, which has been pretty cool. So my goal is to expand that even more. And my goal is to really try to get into some countries we haven't been in yet, work in some different types of clients. And as far as our team, the goal is to try to grow the team a little bit, hire on some more people. So yeah, we're just looking for, a good rest of the year and some expansion, and just really continuing to take this to the next level and try to help as many businesses as we can. Sure. My whole thing with processology is if you operate better, you'll live better. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do. Yeah,
I love that. If you operate better, you'll live better. It's kind of like my simpler, faster, better way of life. It's real similar. So what would be a desired country, in case somebody's watching this as a replay and they have some process connection? What would be your next country you'd like to be in?
So we recently worked with a company based out of Africa. We'd love to do some more work there. We'd love to do some work in like Greenland or something like that. Would be really cool. So I mean, I'm pretty much open to anything. Obviously, we love working with new people. But for me, I really like just kind of learning about different cultures and the different way that people are operating in other areas, and just seeing how people are getting creative with their operations.
Sure. Yeah, I actually have a really strong connection. She's on sick leave right now, but she's in South Africa, so that might be an interesting potential introduction. So as I said, she's off for a couple of weeks, so once she comes back on stream and online, then that might be a good, because it's amazing what she's doing over there. So doing some real interesting. Yeah, a lot of countries do things, particularly when they don't have as much resources as the USA. They get way more creative about how to get stuff done, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, with all the technology we have coming out, being able to use that stuff in creative ways. And what I found is being able to take this technology that we have pretty much available at our fingertips to some places that may not have it. So figuring out how to help them get to where they want to go to. So
that's an awesome mission. Yeah, I agree with you. Taking technology we take for granted somewhere else is an awesome mission to have.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate your time. And if you just wait while I finish up here. And again, if you're seeing this as a replay, we can still take questions afterwards. Thank you, Gracie Ruth, Gracie Ruth's been documenting some of the things for us as we go, Michael. So you'll be able to see that afterwards, including your website, etc. And she's really good at recording the commentary that I put out there in the live interviews as well. So
that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, man. Hang on. Thank you. Thanks, Gracie Ruth. Good night, everybody.